Before we begin today's case, take one moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It may seem insignificant, like a small action that changes nothing. But support like that is what allows stories like these to be told. Every comment, every subscription, every interaction keeps this space alive. More importantly, it helps stories like this reach people who may understand them more deeply than they expect. Because the cases shared here are not simply stories, they are reflections of real human emotions, quiet struggles, and moments that often seem harmless until they reveal something much larger underneath. And sometimes, the events that quietly reshape people's lives do not arrive with chaos or warning signs. They begin on ordinary days. Days so forgettable that without what followed, nobody would remember them at all. And this case began exactly that way, a quiet evening. A familiar routine. A moment that initially appeared meaningless, but slowly uncovered emotions buried deep inside a family, already struggling with silent grief. Looking back now, it becomes clear that what happened that evening did far more than create temporary embarrassment. It changed the way people inside that home looked at one another. It altered communication, trust, and emotional connection in ways none of them understood at the time. Because sometimes the smallest moments expose the deepest wounds people have spent years trying to ignore. This is the story of the evening that quietly changed everything. The day itself was completely ordinary. Nothing remarkable happened. No serious conversations, no conflict, no event important enough to stand out from any other day. It was the kind of afternoon that fades into the background of memory almost immediately. School had been uneventful. No surprises, no excitement. Just another routine day passing, exactly as expected. Even the weather felt forgettable. The sky carried no drama, no storm clouds, no breathtaking sunset demanding attention. Just soft evening colors slowly fading together, orange dissolving quietly into blue. Calm. Almost deceptively calm. And sometimes, life hides its most important turning points inside moments that appear completely harmless. By the time the sun began lowering toward the horizon, I had already started my usual jogging routine. Running was never something I genuinely enjoyed. Most days I disliked it completely. Halfway through every run, my legs would ache, my lungs would burn, and my body would start trying to convince my mind to stop. But I continued doing it anyway. Not because I cared deeply about fitness, not because I was disciplined. I ran because of what it did to my thoughts. Sometimes running helped me think clearly. Other times, it helped me stop thinking entirely. And silence inside your own mind is rare. That particular evening though, the run felt unusually difficult. The air seemed heavier than normal. The road felt endless. Every step demanded more effort than the one before it. And by the time I finally reached home, I felt completely exhausted. Sweat clung to my skin, my shirt was soaked. My legs felt weak enough to collapse at any moment. At that point, there was only one thing I wanted. A long hot shower. The kind that washes away more than physical exhaustion. The kind that slows the world down and creates distance between you and everything outside for just a few quiet minutes. When I stepped inside the house, silence greeted me immediately. At first, it didn't seem strange. The house had been quiet before. But this silence felt different somehow. There are two kinds of silence inside a home. One feels comforting, peaceful, safe. The other feels heavy. It makes you pause even when nothing appears wrong. That evening, it was the second kind. My aunt and cousin were not home, which normally wouldn't have mattered. But ever since my uncle died 3 years earlier, the house had never truly felt the same again. Before his death, everything had felt alive, not chaotic, just full of life. Conversations overlapping from different rooms. Laughter echoing through the hallway. Small arguments that somehow turned into jokes later. The kitchen had once been the center of everything. There was always movement, cooking sounds, casual conversations, someone humming for no reason. Life existed loudly there. But after he passed away, the house didn't become empty. It simply became quieter, as though someone had lowered the volume on everything. We were all still there. Still living under the same roof. But something important was missing. And although none of us ever spoke about it directly, every one of us felt the absence. Still, I didn't think deeply about any of that evening. I dropped my running clothes aside, grabbed a towel, and headed straight for the bathroom. The moment the warm water touched my skin, everything inside me began loosening. the exhaustion, the tension, the noise in my thoughts. Steam filled the room while the sound of water hitting the tile created a slow, steady rhythm that almost felt hypnotic. For a few minutes, the outside world disappeared completely. No stress, no responsibilities, no thoughts about the past or future. Just warmth and silence. I stayed in there longer than usual. Not only because I was tired, but because it felt like the only place where life temporarily slowed down, the only place where nothing demanded anything from me. And without realizing it, the moment I stepped out of that bathroom was the moment everything quietly shifted. When I finally turned off the water, wrapped a towel around myself, and stepped into the hallway, I assumed the house was still empty. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't being cautious. I was relaxed, still mentally distant from the calm of the shower. But the moment I walked into the living room, I stopped instantly. My aunt was sitting on the couch. Beside her sat my cousin, both staring directly at me. And in that single second, the atmosphere changed completely. My heart jolted immediately, not because of the towel itself, but because of the shock. The sudden realization that I had misunderstood the situation entirely, that I wasn't alone, that I had walked directly into a moment I wasn't prepared for. Embarrassment arrived instantly. Not slowly. Not gradually. All at once. My thoughts scattered in every direction. I remember trying to speak, maybe apologizing, maybe saying something awkward that made no sense at all. Honestly, I can't remember. Remember is grabbing my clothes and rushing toward my room as quickly as possible. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing harder than I should have been. Not from running, from discomfort, from confusion, from a strange feeling I couldn't fully explain. At first, I told myself it meant nothing. Just a small awkward misunderstanding. Something everyone would forget by the next morning. But sitting there alone in my room, staring at the floor, one thought kept returning. Why did it feel bigger than it should have? Why did something so small suddenly feel so uncomfortable? I pushed the thought away, changed clothes, and convinced myself everything would return to normal by morning, but life rarely works that way. The moments people try hardest to dismiss are often the ones that remain the longest. Over the following days, something inside the house shifted. Not dramatically. Nothing obvious, nothing anyone could clearly explain, but something felt different. Small details began standing out. Glances lasting slightly longer than usual. Conversations pausing unexpectedly. Moments where someone looked as though they wanted to say something but chose not to. Individually, none of these things seemed important. Together, however, they created tension. A quiet kind of tension, the kind that settles silently into the background and refuses to disappear completely. My cousin still joked with me. My aunt still spoke normally. But something underneath the surface felt altered. And the more I noticed it, the more my mind replayed that moment in the living room, over and over again. Then, a few nights later, I was sitting in my room with the lights dimmed, headphones on, completely absorbed in an online game. For a while, everything felt normal again. Until the bedroom door opened. My cousin walked in, same smile, same teasing energy. She joked about how much time I spent gaming before sitting beside me to watch the screen. At first, the interaction felt completely familiar. But beneath it something invisible had changed. Not inappropriate, not obvious, just awareness. The strange kind that suddenly makes familiar people feel unfamiliar. We laughed. We talked normally, but every interaction felt slightly more careful than before. Every joke felt measured. It was as though both of us sensed something neither of us fully understood, and neither of us wanted to acknowledge aloud. And eventually, something became clear to me. The moment in the living room was never the real issue. It was only the trigger. The actual problem had existed long before that evening. Ever since my uncle died, grief had quietly settled over the house. Instead of confronting it, all of us avoided it. Everyone focused on appearing strong. Everyone pretended normal life was enough. But silence slowly became habit. And habits can hide pain for years. One evening, my aunt asked me to sit with her in the den. Her voice sounded calm, but there was heaviness behind it. At first, I assumed she intended to mention the awkward incident. But she didn't. Instead, she talked about my uncle, about losing him, about how deeply his absence had changed her. She explained how everyone inside the house had slowly stopped communicating after his death, How silence replaced closeness. How emotional distance quietly grew between all of us, without anyone truly noticing it happening. Then she said something that stayed with me permanently. The house hasn't felt alive since he left. Not because we stopped caring about each other, but because we stopped talking about the things that mattered. And suddenly, everything made sense. After that conversation, things did not improve overnight. But slowly, they began changing. Dinner conversations lasted longer, genuine laughter returned. The awkwardness didn't disappear immediately, but it slowly transformed into understanding, honesty, and connection. We stopped pretending everything was fine, and finally began supporting one another honestly, and little by little, the house started feeling alive again. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't understand back then. Sometimes the moments people wish had never happened become the moments that begin healing. That uncomfortable evening could have remained nothing more than an embarrassing memory. Instead, it became the moment that forced us to reconnect, communicate, and finally confront the grief we had all been avoiding, because silence does not heal pain. Connection does. And if this story stayed with you, if you've ever experienced a moment that seemed small but quietly changed everything, then subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like on the video. It helps more than you realize. And if you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, leave them in the comments below. I read every single one. Because sometimes, hearing another person's story helps people finally understand their own.